The Long Road by Wolfland. 1-on-1. Stephen met her heated gesture with a cold stare. It was an uncommon battle format, and as much as he wanted to let Metagross save its strength for what lay ahead after Victory Road, this was not the time to hold back. Hefting its Pokeball in his hand, Stephen accepted the challenge. Fine, 1-on-1. Sheila cackled. Don't say I didn't warn you. With a heave, her Pokeball arced through the air before spilling her Pokemon onto the cavern floor. A strong stench immediately filled the air, and Stephen would have covered his nose in disgust if he wasn't so pleased to see the muck slosh into its solid form. A supply thief that specializes in poison types? Now I know why you wanted a 1-on-1 match. Too bad it won't work on me. You're pretty confident for a trainer who has no way to heal. Now, throw out your Pokemon so I can see the look on your face when I drown it in a pile of sludge. With pleasure. Metagross's roar rattled through Stephen's bones, and the sensation had never felt better than when it was punctuated by Sheila's confused shout. What the heck is that thing? Stephen grinned. You're about to find out. Metagross, Meteor Mash! In one powerful punch, Metagross tore across the battlefield and drove its foreleg through Muck's body, practically exploding the poison type's entire left side in a shower of purple goo. Sheila's eyes went wide at the vicious attack, and several gasps came from the onlookers as a horrific, garbled cry issued forth from the quivering, misshapen mass that was all that remained of Muck's form. Stephen flinched, startled, as even he didn't expect this kind of gruesome injury from his Pokemon's attack. He had assumed that Muck's level would have closely matched that of his team, and yet Metagross sliced through its defenses as if they were nothing. Recovering from the initial shock, Sheila's face returned to her usual smug look. The remnants of Muck's slime still coated Metagross's foreleg. Big mistake. Muck's ability lets it poison anything it touches. Better take the last part of this battle to say goodbye to your Pokemon. Clearly hearing the triumph in her voice, Metagross grated a rumbled laugh and turned to lock eyes with the rogue trainer. As she looked down at the remnants of its handiwork, Metagross flicked its leg and easily shed the murky slime from its hide. Sheila sputtered in dismay. Having a steel type only proves you're lucky, not good. Don't think you've won just because of an immunity. Suddenly, the one-armed pile of slime that had slumped over from its wounds gave a shuddering jolt. Muck gurgled another roar, and the parts that had been splattered to the cave floor began to twitch, slowly coalescing into puddles, and then into mounds, before slowly crawling their way back to the main body. Frowning, Stephen beckoned his partner to return cautiously to his side of the battlefield. We've learned a long time ago that taking your opponent for granted is a quick way to be handed a loss. Although, it does feel pretty good, knowing that your favorite strategy won't work against us, and we don't plan on finding out what your backup plan is. End it quick, Metagross! Zen Headbutt! Too late! Sheila practically crowed. Minimize! Stephen frowned as Metagross shot through the empty air that formerly was Muck's regenerated center mass. Sheila's voice rang out, bolstered by the miss. I don't care how strong your Metagross is. It doesn't mean anything if it can't land a hit. Already fed up from their shouting match earlier, Stephen rubbed the bridge of his nose in annoyance as he muttered, Yes, but Muck can't lay a hand on Metagross either. Who said I was going after Metagross? Muck, Sludge Wave! Aim for the pretty boy in the suit! What? You can't attack a trainer? That's against league rules! Does it look like I care about following the rules? Muck, bury him! The compressed poison type began to rapidly swell to nearly double its normal size as it filled with excess poison. Steven gritted his teeth as the realization struck. Metagross was fast, but its bullet punch wouldn't be strong enough to stop Muck from launching its attack. In an instant, Muck shrank back down to its minimized form, unleashing a massive wave of poisonous sludge. Steven could feel the rush of air pushing past him as the wave poured forth. The attack was so large, there would be nowhere to escape its impact. Metagross would weather the blow just fine, but he wouldn't. Not to mention the rest of the trainers behind him, who were undoubtedly scrambling in a futile effort to get out of the range of their leader's bloodlust. Running was out of the question, and if the rules were too... Steven ripped a second Pokeball from his belt. "Claydol, we need your help!" Wasting no time, Steven broke into a sprint as he shouted his commands. "We need to stop that attack! Metagross, shatter the ground with Meteor Mash to break up that wave! Claydol, set up your light screen and shield those trainers!" Both Pokemon spared their trainer a momentary glance, and Steven caught their meaning. "Don't worry about me." His expression was firm as another Pokeball enlarged in his hand. "Now get going!" Needing no further reassurance, Metagross and Claydol rushed into action as the wave closed in around the trio. The ground lurched beneath his feet as Metagross landed its blow, but Steven couldn't spare a glance to see if it had worked. Instead, he heaved his third Pokeball as far ahead of him as he could throw. "Skarmory!" His lungs burned as he shouted over the roaring din. "Up! Take me up!" Skarmory barely had enough time to blink off the confusion of being thrust into the chaos before Steven practically flung himself at his loyal flyer. Craning to eye its frantic trainer, Skarmory needed no further urging as it caught sight of the poisonous deluge that surged towards them. The churning and hissing of the wave boiled in from all sides as Skarmory clawed at the ground for a running takeoff. With a wild squawk, it pumped its wings as Steven ducked his head low to hazard a glance behind them. He looked back, just in time to see the sludge wave crest through a field of rocky debris, swept up from Metagross's attempt to slow its momentum. As the ground rushed away, Steven held on tight as a spray of sludge and stone rained down. He only exhaled in relief as he saw the wave breaking against Claydol's barrier that stood strong in front of the huddled group of trainers. Metagross's roar echoed across the cave, and Skarmory banked towards the sound. Steven's eyes darted around the battlefield as Skarmory circled the residual sludge-filled crater. Scanning diligently, he only gestured when he caught sight of movement towards the back of the cavern. "There! Skarmory, take us down!" Sheila had almost made it to the cave exit before a silver gleam darted overhead. By the time she looked up to see what it was, Skarmory had already pinned her exhausted Muck beneath one gleaming talon. Steven's eyes were alight with anger as he dismounted. "How could you do that to your own people?" "Do what? Try to defeat an intruder that threatened our way of life?" They knew the risks. Sheila practically bristled at the accusation. "Are you crazy? You'd willingly sacrifice these trainers just for a single victory?" Skarmory leaned in with a screech to punctuate his trainer's outburst. Sheila shied back from the glowering steel type, but her expression remained defiant. "Every time! You can't show any weakness if you want to survive in this world!" Steven opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but his eyes flicked to something over the rogue leader's shoulder and held his tongue instead. "You didn't care that you could have killed us?" The meek voice caused Sheila's head to wheel around. Her jaw fell slack as she saw that the very trainers she had condemned were now assembled behind her. The young trainer from earlier stared at her with wide, terrified eyes. Others wore tight expressions, and even Sydney had a frown on his face as he stood next to Cacturn, arms crossed. "What? No! No! This isn't over! I have more Pokemon! I'll fight—" "Stop, Sheila. Just stop. Sydney stepped forward, shaking his head. I think I speak for the rest of the group when I say this. Life down here isn't easy, we know that. But that's why we're down here. To live. We need a leader that is going to look out for everyone. If it's so easy for you to discard the lives of your followers over one trainer, I'd hate to see what you'll do when a real threat to our group comes along. Sheila, you are hereby stripped of your leadership position and are banished from the colony. Stephen watched in silence as the rest of the trainers stepped up behind Sydney, voicing their support. But the former leader was incensed, and she continued to shriek wildly. You can't throw me out! I saved you! I won't let you take my home away from me! Muck, kill them all! At Sheila's commands, Muck churned to life beneath Skarmory's claws. Squawking in surprise, Skarmory jumped back in a flurry of wings as Muck threatened to engulf its legs as it swelled back to full size. In the commotion, Sheila lunged towards the cave exit in a desperate bid to save herself. But just as quickly as Trainer and Pokemon surged into action, two voices rang out in unison. Cladle, Extrasensory, Cat Turn, Sucker Punch! Muck was immediately toppled with a piercing strike of psychic energy, and so too was Sheila at the hands of Cacturn's swift strike. Stephen and Sydney exchanged glances as Cacturn returned to its trainer's side, cradling the unconscious woman in its arms. Sydney broke the silence, running a hand nervously along the side of his shaven head. Look, I'm sorry about this mess. We don't have much down here, so it's nowhere near enough to make up for it, but the least I can do is give you back your stuff. The young trainer had already run off and returned with Stephen's bag, holding it up apologetically. Hefting his pack to his shoulder, Stephen slung it around to the front and rummaged around inside. If what Sheila said is true, and I'm nearly halfway done, I can spare some of what I packed. Sydney looked at him as if he had grown a second head, and Stephen shrugged as he dropped the offered supplies in his hands. Hopefully this can spare the next few trainers that come through. Sydney shook his head in disbelief. I'd be lying if I promised we'd never pull this sort of thing again. But Stephen only smiled in return. I'm not asking you to promise anything. Just allow me to make one of my own. Sydney looked on questioningly, but nodded. If I go on to become champion, I'll do everything in my power to see that anyone here who wants to still take on the League Challenge gets their fair shot, and anyone that wants to stay here will get the supplies they need without having to steal. Again, Sydney searched Stephen's face for any sign of deceit, and Stephen couldn't hide his amusement. Of course, this is all dependent on actually becoming champion in the first place. But you have my word. Still not really believing what he was hearing, Sydney finally relented and gave a cocky smile. I can't say I'm going to be holding my breath, but part of me really wants you to win. Stephen smiled before he turned towards the exit, Pokemon in tow. Take care, Sydney, until we meet again. Only upon completion of the Victory Road Challenge will trainers be allowed to enter the Pokemon League headquarters to face the top trainers in the region, the Elite Four. Defeat these four masters in battle, and earn the right to have one final battle for the title of champion.